Amara wiped her hands on her apron and let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. The morning shift was always brutal at Rosie's diner, especially on Thursdays when the regulars came in hungover, demanding extra coffee, and the tips were worse than usual. Her feet ached in shoes that had long given up the idea of comfort, and her stomach rumbled. She hadn't eaten since yesterday. But she smiled anyway. That's what she always did. Because sometimes a smile was all she had left. Outside the window, the world passed her by. Men in sharp suits, women in glossy cars, people with somewhere to go and money in their pockets. And then he walked in. Just a boy, maybe 21, maybe less. Tall but tired, with torn shoes and eyes that didn't know how to lie. He walked like someone who didn't want to be noticed, head low, hands in the pockets of a jacket that had seen better days. He took the seat at table 9, the one by the corner, where the heating never worked, and sat still like he was afraid even that would cost him. Amara noticed him because she always noticed the quiet ones. There was a sadness in his eyes that mirrored something she knew too well. Abandonment, hunger, shame. She brought him a menu, and he looked at it the way a blind man might look at a painting, grateful but distant. She watched as he scanned the prices, then closed the menu with trembling fingers. "Can I just get a glass of water?" he whispered. "Of course," she said gently. But something tugged at her. He wasn't just passing by. He was starving, and she couldn't pretend not to see it. As she poured the water, she made a decision that made no sense to her wallet but made all the sense in the world to her heart. She went back to the kitchen, scraped together a plate of scrambled eggs, 2 slices of toast, and added a side of fries. She told herself she'd say it was a mistake, that someone canceled their order, that she had to throw it out anyway. She placed the food in front of him without a word. The boy blinked, stunned. I didn't order, on the house," she smiled. "It's leftover. Can't let good food go to waste." He hesitated, then his hunger won. He devoured the food with a mix of desperation and humility that made Amara's throat tighten. "Thank you," he whispered between bites. "You don't know what this means. It's just breakfast," she said, waving him off. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. Because she'd been him once. Alone, hungry, forgotten. She didn't ask his name. She didn't need to. She just gave him kindness and watched him slip away into the cold morning, nodding one last time before vanishing down the street. That should have been the end of it. A small act of humanity in a world too busy to care. But the next day, everything changed. Amara came into work like usual, her hair tied in a messy bun, apron freshly washed, ready to face another long day. But something was off. There were men in uniform standing outside the diner. A lot of them. And they weren't just any men. These were soldiers, rows and rows of them, standing like a wall of strength and purpose. At first, she thought there'd been an emergency. But then one of them stepped forward, a broad man with medals gleaming on his chest, and asked in a voice that carried weight, "Who is Amara?" She froze. I'm Amara." The man saluted her. "Miss, we've been ordered to report here by our commanding officer. He asked us to deliver a message." Confused, heart pounding, she stepped outside as the soldiers formed a perfect line. Then the man spoke again. He said, "Tell her she fed a hungry soldier when no one else would. That she reminded him of home. That kindness must be repaid. And that she is never forgotten." Amara's knees buckled. The boy at table 9. He was a soldier. The officer handed her a letter. It was handwritten, neat, and filled with emotion. In it, the boy explained everything. His name was Aeon. He was a recruit returning to base after being discharged for a brief leave to attend his mother's funeral. He had no money left. No food. And no strength. But that meal. It gave him the will to keep going. To return to duty. To fight for something bigger than himself. And he told his entire battalion about her. About the waitress who gave him dignity when the world gave him none. "So we're here," the letter ended, "because a soldier never forgets a kindness." The officer stepped aside and suddenly, 300 soldiers saluted in perfect harmony. To her. To Amara. The poor waitress who paid for a stranger's meal. The crowd that had gathered clapped in awe. Phones recorded, faces cried, and Amara stood trembling, overwhelmed, and speechless. Rosie, the owner of the diner, wept openly. She pulled Amara into a hug. "I always knew you had something special," she whispered. But Amara didn't feel special. She just did what was right. That night, the story went viral. People across the country shared her story, called her an angel, a hero, a symbol of hope. Donations poured in. News channels begged for interviews. But through it all, Amara stayed humble. Because she knew something the world often forgot: kindness doesn't need a camera. It just needs a heart. And hers had never been richer. The sun had barely risen when the letter arrived at Amara's door. It wasn't from a news agency or a reporter. Those had come and gone, all of them eager to bottle her kindness into headlines. No, this envelope was plain. Handwritten. Simple. And it smelled faintly of leather and metal polish. She sat at her small table, the same one she'd had since she was 16, and unfolded it with trembling hands. It was from Aeon, the boy, the soldier. His handwriting was neat, precise, each letter etched like it meant something. Dear Amara, it began, I hope this letter finds you in peace, because you deserve nothing less. I'm writing from a military post far from the city. I won't say where. I'm not allowed. But I think of you every day. That morning at the diner, you may not realize it, but you saved me. Amara's breath caught in her throat. She kept reading. I was broken. Grief had hollowed me out. My mother's passing left a silence inside me I couldn't shake. I hadn't eaten in 2 days. I didn't care. I thought maybe it would be easier if I just disappeared. But then you came. With your worn apron and tired smile, you saw me. Not just a hungry man, but a person. You fed me like I mattered. That act brought me back to life. I promised myself that day, if I make it out of this service alive, I will find you. I will thank you not just with words, but with my life. Amara blinked away tears, pressing the letter to her heart. The diner was still quiet outside. The world hadn't changed, but inside her chest, something had shifted. Days passed, then weeks. Life tried to go back to normal, but it never truly did. The story had traveled across countries. A billionaire from Dubai offered to buy her a new diner. A talk show host sent her an invitation to New York. A local politician asked her to speak at a charity gala. But Amara wasn't chasing lights. She just wanted peace. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she was waiting. For Aeon. For the boy from Table 9. One rainy Thursday, exactly 6 months from that fateful breakfast, the bell above Rosie's diner rang once again. Amara looked up from the counter, her heart skipping. And there he was. Not in torn shoes or a tattered coat, but in full military uniform. Clean, polished, proud. And still, in his eyes, that same gentle sadness. That same gratitude. You came back, she whispered. I told you I would, he smiled. She rushed to him, and they embraced, not like strangers, but like two people who had carried each other through storms. Everyone in the diner stood and clapped. Rosie brought out pie on the house. Even the mayor, who happened to be there that day, stood with his hand over his heart. This man, Amara said, tears slipping down her cheeks, reminded me why kindness matters. Not because it gets noticed, but because someone always remembers. Aeon didn't say much. He wasn't the type. But that day, he slipped something into her hand under the table. A folded paper. She opened it and gasped. It was a deed. To a house. Not a big one, but hers. Paid in full. I saved every cent I earned these last few months, he murmured. It's yours. No more rent. No more scraping by. Amara shook her head, stunned. Aeon, you gave me my life back. Let me give you something in return. But that wasn't all. A few days later, he returned again, this time not alone. With him came 300 soldiers. Again, in uniform, marching down Main Street. But this time, they carried something. One by one, they brought in boxes, books, clothes, supplies, money. All collected from their bases. For the poor, for the waitresses, for every Amara in the world. They called it, Operation Kindness. And Amara became its face. News traveled fast. Schools invited her to speak. Families thanked her for reminding their children that goodness wasn't weakness. And Aeon, he never left again. He became a local hero, but more than that, he became Amara's anchor. Months passed, then a year. They weren't just friends anymore. Something deeper bloomed between them. He brought warmth to her winters. She brought calm to his storms. And when he got down on one knee outside Rosie's, where it all began, there wasn't a single dry eye in the crowd. You once paid for a stranger's meal, he said, but you gave me something priceless, hope. Will you let me spend the rest of my life repaying it? And Amara, still wearing her old apron for luck, nodded through tears. Only if you let me keep loving you in return. Their wedding was small but beautiful. Rosie was the maid of honor. Half the guests were soldiers. The other half were people who'd once eaten at the diner and never forgot the warmth in Amara's smile. Aeon left the army soon after and began working with youth, helping orphans and young men stay off the streets, inspired by the life he could have lost. Amara opened a new diner, this one bigger, warmer, filled with music, books, laughter. And outside its doors, a plaque in bronze that read, "Here, a stranger was fed, and a nation remembered." The story didn't end there. Every year on the same date, soldiers returned, not just from that base, but from others across the country. They called it Amara Day, a tradition born from one act of kindness. And as Amara would tell every young waitress who walked through her doors, kindness costs nothing. But it returns everything. And so, a poor waitress who once scraped together a free meal became a symbol of compassion. Not for fame, not for fortune, but because she cared when no one else did. And the world noticed, not with cameras or spotlights, but with hearts wide open. So the next time you see someone in need, remember this story. Because you never know who's sitting at your table 9. They say kindness creates a ripple that travels across oceans. But no one ever tells you what happens when the wave returns, not with applause, but with a plea for help. It had been a year since the day the soldiers marched through Main Street. A year since Amara stood under the banner of Operation Kindness and married the man she'd once fed at table 9. Life had settled into a rhythm she had never dared dream of before, warm hands in winter, quiet evenings with laughter in the kitchen, children from the orphanage coming in for free pancakes on Sundays. Aeon, no longer in uniform, spent his days helping veterans get jobs and youth find purpose. The new diner, Amara's Haven, wasn't just a restaurant. It had become a lighthouse for the forgotten. And yet, one stormy night, as the sky cracked open with thunder, Amara stood again behind the counter, and knew something was wrong. The diner door opened slowly. A young soldier, barely 20, stepped in, soaked and shivering. His name tag read, Rahman. His eyes were wild, haunted, like he'd seen something no one should see. Is this the place where kindness lives? He asked in a trembling voice. Amara's heart skipped. Yes, you're safe here. He sat down and said only this, they need you. The 300. That night, Aeon read the message hidden in the soldier's coat. His old unit, now deployed in a far, conflict-ridden province, had fallen into crisis. Cut off from food, resources, and media. One message had made it out, through Rahman. Tell her, she'll know what to do. The government was silent. Politics had choked the response. But the soldiers remembered her. And they believed in her. Amara didn't wait. She couldn't. The next morning, she stood on the diner counter, apron fluttering like a flag, and made a call to her town. To every camera, every phone, every broken soul who'd ever sat at table 9. They need us, she said. The ones who came when we didn't ask. The ones who stood for us. Now they are forgotten. I will not forget. Will you? And just like that, the ripple returned. Truck drivers donated fuel. Bakers sent bread. Nurses packed first aid kits. Hundreds volunteered. And leading them all, Amara and Aeon. They built a relief convoy under banners that read, for the forgotten 300. Across deserts and mountains, over lands littered with danger, they moved. Word spread. Other convoys joined. And finally, after 12 sleepless nights, they reached the soldiers. Emaciated, exhausted, but alive. When Aeon stepped out of the truck, the officer who once saluted Amara fell to his knees. You came, he whispered. You always come. The reunion wasn't quiet. It was thunderous with tears and laughter. Men who had faced death broke bread with the woman who once gave a boy breakfast. But something happened that no one expected. A landmine went off 2 hills away, triggered accidentally by a lost animal. Aeon didn't flinch. He ran toward it, not from duty, but instinct. There were civilians near the blast. In saving them, he was hit by shrapnel. Not fatal, but deep. They rushed him back. Blood stained Amara's hands as she held him under the open sky. Don't you dare leave me, she whispered. He smiled, pain in his eyes. I won't. I've got a home now. And in that moment, as a helicopter arrived to take him, 300 soldiers stood again. This time, they saluted her, not in ceremony, but in faith. Because now, she wasn't just a symbol. She was their leader. Back in the city, after Aeon's recovery, Amara was awarded the nation's highest civilian honor. She refused to accept it alone. On stage, she made space for every cook, every child who drew cards for the soldiers, every trucker who drove overnight. This isn't about me, she said into the mic. This is about remembering. Every one of us has a table 9 moment. The question is, will we look away, or will we show up? The crowd wept. But there was more. 1 year later, on the same date, under a quiet moon, Amara received a letter from a girl in a village far away. She had seen the video. She had started her own haven. 1 meal a day, free. And she had a message. Someone paid for my brother's meal once. He didn't say who. But he came home, and he lived. Thank you. Amara folded the letter and placed it on the wall of the diner, right next to Aeon's military photo and the bronze plaque. Her eyes traced the words on the plaque again. Here, a stranger was fed, and the world remembered. But now she added a new line beneath it. In her own handwriting, and when the soldiers cried, she marched for them. Because kindness, real kindness, is louder than war. Stronger than politics. Braver than fear. And it always, always comes back. So if you're watching this, maybe you're that soldier. Maybe you're the waitress. Maybe you're the hungry. Or the hero. But no matter who you are, remember this. One act of love can ripple through time and return as a rescue. Be the one who starts it.